Thanks for joining. This is Dan Kinsey. We have a number of products that we've developed. Many of you are our customers. I know the registration today had probably 10 or 15 of our existing customers on the call, which is always great to see. Just as we have new people trying to learn the products, and this is a great way to get introduced to them. So they're basically generally new names at existing clients, so it's good to see. So on the webinar invite, we had mentioned a number of things that I wanted to go over on the bullet list specifically that might have brought your attention to why you registered today. So what we're really trying to do is help you out on either if you're a security administrator or you're providing reports to your auditors and it's difficult to get those reports out. That's the kind of information we're trying to make it easy for you to get. So I'm going to run through a PowerPoint of a few things. And again, I'm recording this session, so I'll chop off the beginning here a little bit, and you'll be able to get this off our website, probably by the end of the day today. So let me go ahead and get started here. We have obviously a short agenda. Let's go right to the products. So I've just got them listed here so you can kind of get your hands around it. If you've gone to our website at kinsey.com, we actually take you through each of these products, and we'll even give you a way to figure out what solutions you need based on what your problems are. So, we try to give you scenarios and say, okay, if this is your situation, these are the products you need. So, you can put any of these combinations of products together based on what you're trying to accomplish. They do all run on their own, which is kind of nice, or they're all designed to pull data from one another, except for maybe, Landmark doesn't pull from, security modeling. But for the most part, these all interact. So I'll go through each of these in our slides here, but primarily we do a couple things within the Lawson application. One is for where we pull data out of your security model, and we'll either run our audit reports based on that, our security user access reports on that, or our segregation of duty reports we'll compare to our policies. And those actually reach in, pull data across, and report against your data, your security setup in Lawson. When we get into the transactional auditing and the activity monitoring, that's where we actually have an application that lives on the Lawson server, takes a copy of your transactions as they're processed in real time, and sends them over to a database that we can report against. That's real-time monitoring or continuous monitoring of your applications within Lawson. And we do it at two different levels. The activity monitor is more of a summarized level, what user is in what form and what record did they look at and what screen action did they take. The transaction auditing, as I'll show you, goes deeper into that and it actually shows me the data behind that form. So let's show you a little bit about, and the problems that we're trying to solve. So, one that we get all the time is, what security reports do you have? Is it easy to see my user security setup? We have a couple of ways we deliver those reports. This dashboard you see here is the way we can go ahead and pull up how your roles are defined, how your security classes are defined, what your user role or user form assignments are. So this goes all the way down to the all objects level. So every table, every program, every field level, we can give you all that detail about how it's assigned and what users have access to what forms. You'll see over here some of the features. We do things like historical reporting. So we take snapshots of your security. At any point in time you want to take a snapshot, you can go back and look and see what your security looked like, a year ago or 6 months ago, whenever you took that snapshot. No limit to how many of those you can take. We do things where we compare against those snapshots. So we can tell you what's different between where you are now and what your security looked like 6 months ago. We can tell you either what roles are assigned different, what the rules changes were on any particular object. We can tell you user role assignments, that kind of thing. And then we'll do some other things in there where you can do email notifications and scheduling reports, and I'll take you in and show you how some of this reporting works. But this is one of the methods we use to deliver reports where I can see every different way a user can get to a particular object. So if they have 3 or 4 different ways it can get to a form, we'll show you the different paths through what roles, what security classes, and what the rules are against those forms. When you run these reports, they're going to come up, everything runs within the browser, IE or Chrome. Firefox is available too. And there's a lot of ways we can do filtering. So we can pull individual users, a list of users. We can pull based on wildcards of users or roles or security classes. There's a lot of ways I'll show you how we do filtering to pull this data across. And with that then, we can drill up or down through the model. So if I start at this role security class form level, I can drill up to see all the users that are assigned to a particular role. I may want to see all the objects in the security class, not just the forms. Maybe I want to see the programs. Maybe I want to see fields. I want to see everything. Maybe you have tables in your security classes. I can show you the detail in this query specifically for forms. And you see here we give you the available function codes along with the rule. We do that because a lot of times you have all access, but all access could be maybe a form that only allows an inquiry and a change. So we want people looking at these reports to understand that all access doesn't necessarily mean you can add or change or delete. Maybe sometimes all access is just an inquiry even. So I'll show you how some of these reports work and some of the functionality you have there. Now, we have another way we do LS reporting, the loss and security reporting, is in what we call our Access Analyzer. This is a little bit different format. You can see it comes out in Excel. You generate it from your browser, from an interface there. But what we do here is we're giving you that level of restriction that the user has. So Lawson, and giving you their actual permissions, by what I mean by that. So what Lawson will do is they'll assign the least restrictive access that is assigned to a user. That's what they'll get on that form. So if you've given them inquiry through one role or one security class and you've given them all access another way, the all access is the least restrictive, so it's going to override. Sometimes we'll have customers that have inquiry through one path and change to another way. Lawson puts those two together and says, I'm going to give you inquiry change. So what we show you here in a format that generally auditors understand, that don't work a lot with Lawson, they don't know how to resolve the conflicts if there are multiple ways somebody can get to the form, we'll give you on the line, on each row, the level of access that user is going to get. So you see the users in columns G, H, I, and J. That's the user name on row 4, and below it are the permissions they're going to have to any particular form in Lawson. If you expand the grouping on the left, you see a plus sign out there. I'll show you how that was determined. So I'll show you the role and I'll show you the security class. If they can get there 2 or 3 different ways, I'll show you what those are and how we determine that, like A. Davis on AC00.1 has INP access. It's very likely that person has INP through one security class role and maybe has A through another path, so Lawson will put it together. But that's what somebody's going to understand, is that they're going to know exactly what level of access that person has without having to determine how to interpret the rules. And you see all the check marks on the left. We do this for the tables, the programs, the field levels. We do all conditional logics in here. There's a lot of sheets in this document. So that's the second way that we give you the loss and security. Then we get to the landmark. So it's going to be very comparable to what you saw with the grid reporting, only now we're at the actors, right? So now I have actors and roles security class, and actors all objects. And you have that loss and programming language that puts in modules and business classes. So we break those apart so we can do searches for things within the rule itself to say, I want to know every business class that contains a particular rule or contains a field, it mentions a field in a rule. I can pull those back. So if you're looking for, employee name, everywhere that is, okay, or social security number, I got to find all the classes that belongs to. We can search those fields and tell you those. It's just something that's not easy to do in the standard reporting. And you're going to have the same kind of things, historical reporting, historical comparisons, favorite reports, email notifications. But we're doing that now with the landmark reporting. Now, a lot of clients only have the process flow, but more and more are going to global HR and talent management, and so they're using these reports. That also comes up in the grid format, and you can see here, the rules and objects are completely different than what you've seen on the LS side. So you don't have HR 11. You have different names behind forms now than these token names we've always had. And the rules are more script rules than they are just add, change, delete functionality. So we break all those apart and give you that information. Right? And the same kind of drill functionality, export functionality, all that kind of thing for landmark. So that's the way we're delivering the reporting. And again, I'm going to, in about 10 minutes here, I'm going to jump actually into the demo. We'll show you how some of those reports work. Then we get into security auditing. So now we need to know all the changes that might be made to the security model. So when an auditor comes and says, when did this role get changed? When did this user role assignment get changed? Who changed this? Who changed AP 10 to be inquiry only? We know when it was done. We know what class it was done in. We know the date and the time. We know everything about that object. We know what the value was before and after. So we actually use a lot of Lawson's tables to pull this data, and then we keep it historically for you and allow you to do a lot of wildcard and nested searches on this data. And like our other reports, you can set up email notifications and favorite reports. And if you're concerned there's a user role assignment, there's a certain role you want to, if anybody gets access to that role, you want to know about it, you can set up a query that'll actually pull that data and email it off to a security officer to say, or whoever it might be, to say, okay, this user now had a role change. Here's what those role changes were. Or this object had a rule change, and here's what that change was. So we can be proactive on getting notifications on critical access to critical forms. But we're doing a lot of things here. So you'll see when we get into this, again, it's all historical reporting. Go back as far as you want, as long as you got the auditing turned on. It's all exportable to PDF or to Excel. But when you get that question of who made that change in security, what was the value before, what was the value after, we're giving you some nice reporting here to pull all that information out. Then we get into our segregation of duties. Now, we know that Lawson provides some of this functionality, right? They have some of the security auditing that you can go in and get some of that information out and run some of the reports. We've just tried to give you a more robust reporting tool to get access to that data. Kind of goes with segregation of duties also. They have the ability, if you don't know this already, in security, you can actually go in and define an SOD policy. Now, we deliver, and by the way, on theirs, I believe you have to set up a report for every policy you define. So, and every rule you set up. Well, we deliver over 200 pre-built policies. It uses over 2,000 rules to go in and check your security. And then we'll come back and give you these reports, and you can run them by individual, what violations an individual has. You can run them by policy and tell me everybody that violates that policy. There's a way we group like users together so we can see, we can kind of tackle that problem. If I have 5 users that share the same roles, I'll group them together on a report and say, here's a report for this user group. This group violates 5 policies. If you fix the security, you're going to fix 5 people. So we're trying to give you some tools here to find out where your violations are and the easiest way to tackle that problem. Then by delivering these 200 policies, you're not starting from ground zero, and you can rate them on level of importance to you. You can disable policies you don't want. You can add as many new policies as you need. So if you have your own existing policies, and you can compare, we compare everything at the form level. So you'll see on the screen here, I have a rule. This first rule, number 152, basically says if I have access, I'm mouse here, to 155, 156, 60, or 61, and have access to AP 150, that's a violation. That's not something we want a user to have. Now, we require them to have more than inquiry-only access. So if it's just inquiry, that's not a violation. So if it's INP plus minus access, we don't care, or all inquiries, that's fine. But if they have the ability to make some kind of change, that's a problem. So what we're going to do is report for you back, and we build all of our policies are delivered at the form or token level because that's where all Lawson clients start. They all have the same forms. You can build as many policies as you want that way, or you can do it by roles. You can do it by security classes, by tables, by fields. So you can say, if you have a HR admin and a GL admin, if anybody has those 2 roles, that's a violation. So it doesn't have to be at the form level. You can just simply set up your own policy to say, just let me know if anybody ever gets those 2 roles, we have a problem. So there's a lot of different ways you can create them, but we're going to deliver these 2,000 rules to you built at the form level. Now, we take that one step further, and when I get into showing you the monitoring activity, we can actually tell you maybe where your highest degree of risk actually lives in your application. And what our risk analysis grid will do is tell us where we actually have violations and what we deem the level of risk to be. So if it's a green box, that means that user is violating that policy, but they're not using any forms that are tied up in that policy. So, you've given them access, and maybe you shouldn't have, but you've given them access, but they never use the forms. So maybe over-provision, but lower risk. The yellow tells me they're using a form on one side of the equation, but maybe not both. So they might use, AP 150, but they're not using all the others. So again, lower risk. They shouldn't have them both, but they're not really violating it by actual usage. And the red tells us where they are using forms on both sides of the logic, and that those are the ones I might want to address and take a look at. But we have an entire application behind, okay, you now have this information. We look at our monitoring usage and activity, so I know what people are using. We'll give you tools in our modeling application to actually say, okay, what if I change that user to, I took AP 150 and made it inquiry only. Would that fix their problem? What if I moved it to a different class? Would that fix their problem? We allow you to create scenarios under which you can do modeling to say, how would I solve these? And if I were to do that, it might fix a lot of people, but you don't ever actually have to go into security and make those changes. We'll allow you to do it in a modeling environment and then come back and give you a report and say, okay, that would do it for you. Give that to your security administrator and let him make those changes. So the monitoring application is what I was referring to as how we know what people are actually going into. So this is at a summary level. So we're keeping everything everybody does in Lawson that comes through a portal transaction. It can be through add-ins. It can be a process flow. It could be a third-party product that uses Lawson's AGS calls. So we're seeing all that data as it flows through. And you'll kind of see on the screen here, we get the user, we get the form they were on, the function code they initiated, the date and the time, and the key to that record. So it'd be like an employee ID or an AP invoice number or a vendor ID, whatever it might be. We're going to get so you'll know not that they were just in the employee master file, but what employee did they actually do? And did they just look at it? Was it an inquiry? Or did they make a change? Or was it an add? You're going to have that data for every transaction that happens in your system. We have clients currently that capture well over 100,000 transactions a day with this tool. Some of those, when they're doing add-ins, have gone up in the mid to high 300,000 transactions in a day. So we can capture millions of transactions that you can come back and see where your activity is in Lawson, what users are doing, who's working on specific forms, anything you want to see. If you get that question, we know that information. Now, a layer deeper, though, would be, okay, what did they see? What information did they change? And that's where we get the transaction audit, where we do this at a form level, not at a database level. So we're not putting triggers on tables and trying to piece a transaction back together. We're actually seeing the transactions as it flowed through Lawson. So if you're on, let's go back to HR 11, that opens up, it's a couple hundred tables at HR 11, the employee master file opens up. Well, we don't have to know all the tables to audit. All we have to know is what's actually on your screen. All your different tabs, all your different fields. And there's like 600 fields or something like that on the HR 11 when you go to all the tabs. So any change made in there, we know there was a change. If they actually changed tabs, we know they changed tabs. So we can capture this data and report back just on, like you see, the one I'm showing here on the screen is a journal entry that was changed. So I can see it was changed from $50 to $65 on one line of a journal entry. If I went to all the detail here, I can tell you which journal entry that was. So I have all that data. Now, generally our clients don't try to do this with all 6,000 to 7,000 forms in Lawson, but they'll do maybe every form for a handful of users, or they'll list 50 critical forms that they want to track that process on, things that Lawson may not audit now. So Lawson will audit your vendor master, they'll audit your customer master, and mainly your master files, but not generally your transaction files. So if you want to know who changed the journal entry, I can tell you who changed it. The monitor would tell you who made the change, but the transaction detail will tell you actually the level and the dollar amount of what it was changed from and changed to. So that's the depth in the product, the difference between the two. But like all the reports, then you can do email notifications, you can do favorite reports, you can have these scheduled and set off. If somebody's making change to a particular form you're concerned about, you can email that off. So let me jump over then into the actual product. So this is kind of one of the many we'll call dashboards. We call the whole thing the dashboard. You see the tabs at the top. You got transaction auditing, the monitor, reporting, landmark reporting. You see all the tools here, right? So I'll go ahead and start where we kind of did in the presentation. And what I had on the invitation, I want to make sure I go through that short list of bullets. So let me go ahead and go into security reporting. Now, I'm not going to go in too much depth here. We are doing a full 1 hour on just security reporting next Thursday. So we're going to take a pretty deep dive into all the functionality of our security reporting. Today I just want to at least give you, hey, how would I get a simple user access report out of here? How would that look? So you'll see all the different queries, and again, I won't go into all of them today. But let me go to user role security class form. Now, there's a number of ways I can build filters. So I can drop this down and say I want the advanced option, where I can actually go in and hold control down, and I can click users, and I can add those across. I can come down here and say the username contains or starts with, and it could be part of the name or the ID, and I could add those across. I can do the same type of thing with roles and security classes, or I can select an actual just user, type in a user. You see all of my options here. Let me go back to all. And again, I can do, when you set this up, it would read your roles, your security classes. It's going to pull out and build this. So I'll go ahead and run this report. Once the grid is populated, I can then add more filters at the column level. So maybe I wanted to pull everything in because I want to work with one set of data. But I only want it contains, let's say, HR11, and I'll filter on that. So I'm just going to pull back HR11. So I can, add these filters, clear them out, do filters on multiple columns. So the first set of filters is what data gets pulled into the grid, and then the next is my working filters as I'm going through this. But if I want to see, the report everybody wants to know is what level of access do my users have. Well, I can click on any column and sort it by user. But if I do grouping, and I can do grouping in a couple ways, I can just do the drop down here and tell it to group by this column. You see it just groups up here. These are all my users. Maybe I want to group by role. So I can drag role up here, and I can now see B. Thomas has 9 roles. There's the 9 roles assigned to him. I can expand one of these, AC Expert. I can see all the objects that are underneath that role. Well, it'd be also nice if I had that by security class. So I'm going to group it up here by security class. So now I'll go to B. Thomas, and I'll see AC Expert. AC Expert has 14 security classes. I see the count. And I could go see what's in AC Budgets. And here now I'll see the form that are assigned. And this is a form. Now I could do all objects, so I'd see programs in here. I'd see anything else that's in the security model. But I just want to look at forms right now. I'll see the available function codes and the level of access that's assigned. So it's pretty easy then to run through there. By the way, you can put this out as group like this. So you can print it straight out, go to PDF, go to Excel, whatever you want to work in. But it's a nice way to know, just tell me what roles a user has assigned to them. Very easy, right? Well, the power of this tool is really the ability to switch this around. So maybe what I want to do is I want to know by form. I'm going to group by form. I want to know what users have access to a form. So I'm going to go user access here. Now, I could have just put a filter on and I could look through everything. But I could also come out here now and still put on that I want HR11. And now if I look at, I got 3 users that have access to HR11. There's the 3. So pretty easy to determine who actually has access to these forms. Right? I just got to get a quick way to get there. And this user can get there through 2 different ways. One's a self-service and one they're an HR director. Here's the rules. They have a conditional rule for their self-service. Probably can only look at their own information. But I can see how this user actually has access to this form. And I can do that for all of my users. Lawson actually has 4 different ways because they have different roles, different security classes. And you can see there's conflicting access here. So if you think they're only going to get INPM plus minus, they're actually going to get all access because that overrides the other. So very easy to actually flip the model upside down or flatten it out. I could have looked at it in complete reverse and just oops, not that way. I want to go security class, then role. Oh, I already got role. And then I could go and user on top of that. And now I'm looking at this model completely upside down. HR11 is in 4 classes. It's in this class, it's in setup, and HR setup is assigned to HR clerical. It's actually HR director has 2 users. But you can see how now I've actually flipped the model upside down, and that's the way I'm looking at it, by form now, as opposed to looking at it from the user down. You have this type of functionality. We have 48 user Lawson queries, well not user, but security queries out here in our model. You can do the same filtering, grouping, sorting, everything in all 48 of these queries. So that's the one thing I wanted to show you there. So I'm not going to go deep on these, but you can at least see the easy way that I can go to user role security class form, what users they actually have. I wanted to know, by the way, all objects. I can go here. I'm going to say equals F Nelson, A-L-S-O-N, run that report, and now I'm going to get my tables. If I group it by type, there's my different types. So programs, reports, tables, what they're assigned to. Right, here's all my table names, descriptions, what security class. So I can get to all objects here, not just forms. I'm going to go ahead and go back to, and I won't go into all the saving reports and comparisons. You might have seen that a little bit here, but again, we'll do it next week. Here's on these things, just run historical comparison, compare profiles. Those are ways that we can go back and look at these different historical reports. Or I can even do, I can say pull from a snapshot. I want to look at, see how my security looked back on 12/31 of 2015, and now all my reports are from how the data existed at that point in time. Again, more about that next week. Now, Security Analyzer is the one, the Excel-based report, and I probably should have had one of these already run, but we'll just start one up and then I'll jump onto something else. This takes a couple minutes. Let me see, if it just takes a minute to run here, I'll let it go. Now, one of the big differences on this report is that you can't do anything to restrict what we show by user. So if you put a user on this report, you're going to get all their security. So an auditor knows that you haven't restricted a role from the report or a security class from the report. I can build restrictions on my other ones, but those are really built for security administrators to really figure out what's going on in Lawson. This one is built more for auditors or department managers that need to overlook their security. And so what I can do, if I have a user in the list, I'm going to get all their security. I cannot filter anything out. So if I'm going to go ahead and pull this up, this comes in Excel. So now you can do everything Excel, that you want to do. You can do filtering and the whole deal. When I get above each user here are their roles that are assigned to them. When I get below them is their level of access. Now this is on categories. So at the bottom here, I'm going to go over to the token screen. And again, I'll scroll this up. These are my roles. I see the individual users. There's some securable types here. If you're using securable types, we highlight that. Those actually can override the level of access a user has on a form. So we want to indicate to you that there are securable types set here, and you need to know what those are. But you'll see here how I have the exact level of access they're going to have. If they have conditional logic, you're going to see that here. You would need to interpret what that does. We say that overrides, because it generally does. It overrides everything else. So we just show you what that conditional logic is. But out here on the left, like I mentioned before, if I were to expand this on activity group, I can see, if I expand these columns, the roles and security classes where this AC001 dot is assigned, and I can see the level of access users have. So you'll see here, this user actually has INP through one security class, I through another, and AINP. Lawson will put those together, and that user is going to get AINP. So anywhere out here, if any of these actually would have had all access, you would have seen all access on this first line because it would override everything else. But if you want to know how do we get to that, how do we determine what they have, just expand the group and we'll give you the roles and the security classes. Now, and if you look at the bottom, again, you're going to get token conditions, field conditions, anybody that's got any logic specifically for that. You're going to get data element groups, you're going to get field conditions, categories, tables, everything in security model. It's going to come out like this. So now you can actually hand it to somebody that doesn't know a lot about security, and at least at the token level, they can look at this and scroll down. They can go straight across what they're concerned about and see the level of access their users have. So a lot of our clients will do this by department, and they'll select their users for department, and they'll save that report. So it'll be an HR department, a finance department, and they'll run it, and their manager will review the level of access their users have. So they can make sure that on a security review, this is kind of one they want to know. If I give them a report that has every possible way they can give there, and they got to determine what does this user really get, that's the other reporting, that's a little more complicated. So this we found for people has been much easier to use. So I'll go ahead and minimize that. And let me go back here. Okay. So that's the two ways we're doing the security reporting. Now the landmark reporting, you're going to see is going to look very similar. So I'll go ahead and pick a server and actor role security class. Here's down to the business class. Same kind of filtering. Let me go ahead and run. I'll run like role, security class, business object. And if I run this one, it's just going to pull back, just like we did before. It's going to give me the full rule. I can now do searches through this rule for any kind of field I'm looking for. I can, through the object, I can search in any one of these fields. And again, I can do the dragging, and I can figure out exactly how this rule is defined, what's in this rule. Or flip it around, and I get a security class. I want to know this security class is assigned to what roles. And of course, if I did this at the user level or the actor level, I get all that information too. So I won't go too deep into that. Again, we can cover that more of that next week. But it works the same way. that the LS reporting works, only now it's based on landmark data, and we break out that loss in programming language into these, into business. You can get it as all objects, but generally people want to break it down by the executable or the business class. Okay. So let me go back here. So let me go then to security auditing. Now this is where we're going to have a scheduled task that runs once a night, goes out, looks at Lawson's audit tables, pulls that data across, and populates our tables so that we can then do our reporting against this. If you make changes during the day, by the way, same thing with LS reporting, landmark reporting, there's an administration panel that we have scheduled processes that actually reach into, on the LS side, it reaches into LDAP, pulls that data across, and sometime in the middle of the night, takes 15 minutes or so and populates our database. If you make changes during the day, you can run that on demand. We just don't want to be banging against LDAP with 2 or 3 users maybe using this tool while Lawson's actually running. So we don't hit LDAP directly during production day. We just pull it at night. But again, you can, if you need changes and you want to see the changes in your report, you can at any time pull that data. And the same thing with the security auditing. It actually captures in Lawson. We pick it up once a night. If you make a change to your security model, go ahead and run that process. We look for what changed. It takes seconds literally to pull it over, and you have it in your reporting. So there's a lot of things I can do here on my searches here. So I can just go in and say, I want to know maybe all changes that have the word Lawson in them. So maybe that's the user Lawson that's making the changes. Okay, that's kind of nice. I can get that. Well, maybe I want to know everything that impacted a certain user. So I'm going to look for F-R-O-B-E-R-T, everywhere H. Roberts. Okay, so here's some changes that impacted H. Roberts. And I can see these were role changes. So I see what the previous role was, what the current value is. So I get the before and after. I know who the user Lawson did it, who it affected, the date and the time it was done. I have all that data. I could do this down, and maybe I just want to know AP 10. This is AP 10.1. I'm looking for changes to that. Okay, so here's the previous rule, the current rule. I can actually even then drill. You see from security class or user, I can drill to that security. So if I don't know what else is in AP setup, I can drill right to the security reports and say, what's going on out there? I want to see what that security looks like. We can do that from here. So our applications, if you don't have security reporting, you can't drill. But if you do, they're going to work together. So even on the condition rules, we'll even tell you the previous, the current, and the differences. No, there aren't any differences here. See if I have one that has a difference. Yeah, here's the current, previous, current, the differences. So we're going to tell you, that actually was changed, the condition was taken out, it was made all access. So on the left-hand side, what you see there are reports that have been saved and scheduled. So if I like this, let's say I want, let's go back to this F. Nelson one. I go to F. Nelson, I can come up here to the top, hit send, and I can put F. Nelson changes, save this. I now have a report over here to the side, and if that's an important report to you, I'm going to go ahead and schedule it. I'm going to tell it I want to take it, I want to run it on, let's run it at the end of the week. I don't need it every day. And let's go to an existing set of an email group, so we'll go to Finance Department, I think that's me, and we'll go to anything 27 through 2016, and we'll save it. So now you see I have a scheduled report, security report, that's going to run out on, I think, Saturday night, something 10 o'clock or something. I'm going to get an email notification of any changes made to that during, well, I might actually probably should have put a time period on this. What I could do here, go to advanced search. I don't really want everything every time. What I really want, if I go date and time, I want is between the beginning of the week to the current date. So now I don't have to set a date in there. I'm just going to say, whenever this runs, go from the beginning of the week and run to the current date. And I'm going to, if I can view that report, I probably don't have anything. But I can save that, and now I have that. Oh, I didn't get anything to save. But I could have saved the report that way, and in fact, I would have only been getting then the week's worth of changes. So we just want to give you a lot of different ways you can pull data. You see all the different selection criteria here. I can look for particular roles, security classes, changes of any one object, all that kind of thing I can do here. So that's the security auditing functionality. And you'll see in the top right corner all my export options. Again, it's always going to be PDF, Excel, or just straight to the printer, or just keep it on the screen. So 2:38, so we got a little bit more time here. So let me now go to I'm going to go back into security reporting so I can kind of show you some of the monitoring. So we report on monitoring a couple ways. We like to embed it in here, but some of the things on my bullet list I put on there were we have user form activity monitoring, user last login or last activity, and user over provisioned. Those are things that we generally want to look at and auditors want to know about. So we want to provide those reports. So, and actually one I could have put on there is the new one we have, this activity lacking security, which I'll explain. Doesn't make sense, but it does if I explain it, hopefully. So let me just look at first like user form detail. Now I'm going to have all kinds of filters here, right? So I can put my date filters on, my users, my forms. I can look for a particular key. So if I'm looking for a certain employee record or a certain invoice number, I have all that. I'll just go ahead and say run this report, and it's going to pull in all my activity. For any user, any form, I can do all the same thing here. So if I want to group this by form, I can now see who's working on, and again, let me go out here. Where's my form? Let me go here and put HR 11. Go back to that one. So now I see, and if I group it by user, all right, so I got 3 users that have worked on HR 11. F. Nelson has processed 28 transactions. A lot of them are next. Some of them are changes. Here's the function code, the date and the time, and the key to the record. So company 1, employee number 108, 102, 101, and how they access that record. That's what I have at this summary level for everything done in Lawson. So it's a great way just to say who is looking at something. I can do it. I have all the inquiries here. Checking on a particular form or by user. I can go this way. How many transactions have they processed? On one form, HR 11, 28 transactions. So if I clear these filters, I can see over whatever time frame I put in how many different transactions a particular user has processed. If I take the form out, I can see F. Nelson has done 175 transactions over whatever time period I had on. I can always go up here and add restrictions in and put date. You know, I can go in between and put dates out here and that kind of thing as well. So we're keeping all this detail so you can search through here to find out what's going on in the application. And then we use this a lot of different ways. So let me go back. Here. Now, last active then is kind of, it's not necessarily login, but it's active because if somebody just logs in and doesn't do anything on their screen, we don't really care. It's when they do something that we care. So again, I could look at one user, but you might get this question. A lot of this stuff came from our customers, auditors had questions, and they said, can you get us this report? Then we leave these in. So this is the last time a user went in and did something in the application. We can give you that report. And that's just because we have that detail. Now, it's only as good as much detail as we have, so we need to keep it for a while. But I know the last time they were in, what form they worked on. But the most important thing I want to know is when's the last time they were actually active in the system. So we have that. Now, they also want to know who has login but hasn't actually done anything to the system. So I can tell you people that have access to Lawson, but I don't know if I have any here, by the way. Okay, I have some users that are set up and can get access to Lawson, but they haven't done anything. Good to know. Again, it came from a company that their auditors requested that information, so they want to know why do you have these people set up if they don't need access to Lawson. We need to know who they are. We can tell you who they are. Right. Users security versus activity. This is a comparison. This is kind of that over provision. What we can do here, again, I wanted to show you these because I put it on the webinar invite, so I want to make sure we got to them. What I can do here is select, I'm going to marry my user security with my activity. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you which forms a user has access to they never used and which ones they do use. So I can do like everything else here. I can group it. I can sort it. If I go by count, you see these are forms A. Davis has access to. They've never been hit. I can reverse this and oh, there we go. And now I can see the forms that actually has activity. So I know these users are using these forms. Well, that's good to know. I may want to just filter this to say it's got to be, maybe it's got to be greater than 0 and I only see them. Or in this case, I want to, if it's equal to 0, if I'm looking at, I only want stuff that's not being used. Here's the stuff that's not being used. So now I can do the same type of thing. I can group it by user, right? And I can see the forms that, let's see, somebody's small here. There's not very many small ones here. But these are the forms not being used by this user. And I can tell they have access to them. I see the security class and the role. So the question is, do they really need them? So we can kind of tell you where people that are over-provisioned and then give you help on how you would solve this and what do we do. You don't necessarily want to take it just out of that class because maybe somebody else needs it in that class. But we don't necessarily need to give these users access to forms they're not using. So that's kind of our over-provision. So we saw our last login activity. We're seeing kind of our over-provision. We're seeing all the detail activity. Now, and then you actually have some summaries here, just the number of times the user has been in a form. And this activity lacking security. This is a request that just came in the last month where the auditors had a user, actually, it came from a user, I don't think it was a request from their auditors, but the user had given another, security administrator had given a user more security than they generally need to do the job that they were filling in for somebody. And then they were going to take it away. So what they wanted to know was, they wanted to know anybody that it might have happened to, because they realized, what if somebody was in a form, something got changed that way and then taken back away? We don't know people that might have gotten into something that don't have access to it now. So we wrote a query that said, if they've ever gotten into that form, but they can't get to it now, I want to know who they are because I want to know how they got there. Because generally they should have never had access to it. So they were trying to trace down where they might potentially have a problem because they were looking at security and saying, that person doesn't have access, so they couldn't have done it. But we know maybe at one time they did. So if I were to run this, and you can do this for ranges of, you don't want to do it for, maybe you're intentionally changing security or taking something away, but you can do it for a date range. So I would say, I want to know, in the last week, was there any activity that somebody went into that they no longer have access to? And we can see that here and see the rule was removed, but we see when they went in and what form they went into and what key they accessed. So, different ways of using this information, but, we can do it. We see all their activity. We see what they shouldn't have access to. We see what they have too much access to. We see the last thing that they ever did. We see people that aren't active. There's a lot of things you can do with this type of information. Then you'll also see some things up here where we're doing for auditors. Well, they want to know when you go in now, if you're federated and you're disabling users, you use the is disabled flag. We don't collect those users now in our support reports. But auditors want to know, I need a list of all those disabled users. So now we'll give you the disabled users, all their attributes, all their identities, of those that have been disabled because you're federated. Then we have some other things that auditors like. I don't think I had on my list, but it's things where if you have the employee master and you have HR, we'll actually reach into your employee file and we'll give you employees that if you haven't disabled them, which maybe you should have done, but sometimes you don't necessarily do that right away. You put a termination date and a status. So maybe they're just on leave and the status is they're on leave. We'll tell you every employee that still has access but has a term date and their status. Another question that came that we were requested to provide. We also give you a list of all those users. That's the term active user but terminated. An active user no employee record would be like a Kinsey consultant that you've set up in Lawson to be able to do work, but they're not an employee in your organization. They also want that list. So these are the types of things, when people say, boy, what can you give us that our auditors might ask for? This is the stuff that our customers are telling us our auditors are asking for. So you may have not gotten these questions. You may have something else that we want to build in, but now we're building this whole, we have, now a half dozen things or more that auditors are looking for. So that's kind of those reports. Now, let me go back home. We've got a couple more things I want to cover. There is a question about, I can jump in, there's a question about how does this affect the performance on the system when you get into transaction auditing and monitoring. And I'll tell you what I told everybody, and our customers, I can open them up and they can tell you, if this impacted performance, nobody would run our products, right? Because they would never let it impact performance. It's a WebSphere app. It's controlled by WebSphere. And it uses filtering the same way Lawson uses filtering. It's actually an application Lawson does allow us to put on the Lawson Cloud. So if they had a problem with it, they wouldn't let us put it on the Infor Cloud. So we do it. We've done it with Velocity Cloud. We've done it with Infor Cloud. We've done it with mainly on-premise, but we have them all. But it's an application that lives within WebSphere, and it actually controls all the performance. So it is real time, but it's not. It's obviously there's a hit, but it's not a measurable hit. It is milliseconds of time for it to go through, and a user will never feel the performance. We've actually been able to help people on trying to figure out. We had a customer the other day that called and said, our system is really sluggish. We have no idea what's going on. We're concerned that your application might be slowing us down. Well, they have been running our application for months and never had the problem. what we discovered that they couldn't get out of their support from calling in with Lawson on their performance was that they had somebody processing add-ins, updates, and they had processed 370,000 transactions in one shot, and it just brought the system to a crawl. So we were actually able to see those 370,000 transactions, tell them the exact days they happened on, and those were the days that they were having these hits. So it wasn't our product causing the problem, it was actually our product that found this huge performance hit, so they could go back to that department and say, hey, you can't do these during the day, it's killing us. So let me go on to segregation of duties. I got another question. Is it installed on the LSF server's WebSphere instance? Yes, that would be correct. It is. Now, let me go to, I'm going to go to SOD real quick. Actually, did we go, let me go back to transaction. I want to show you one other thing on transaction auditing here. There's a couple of things we can do here. Now, we have a lot of pre-configured audits. They're very easy to define on your own. Say, I want to audit this person, I want to audit this form, I want to audit all HR forms. The setting up of the rules is very simple. We deliver about 60 of them, but you can, again, it takes us a couple minutes to set up a new rule. Now, I can do things like, if I go out here and look at employee master changes and just run this report, what's kind of cool, I think, about what we've done here is we're trying to give you the ability to actually find data easily. So you can build this filter, but we want to give you more dynamic filtering. So now I've seen, okay, here's all the, whatever my criteria here, let me go to advanced search, and it's just the username is Lawson and the form is HR11. Okay, but maybe I want to know, if I hold my control key down, what I can say is I want to know everything Lawson did on 8/23. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say search for everything they did on H23. Okay, they did a lot of work on H23. Well, what I also want to know is, we want to know everything. They don't know everything that Lawson did on HR13. I don't care about the day. So I'm going to now search that way. And I'm just opening different tabs here, and I can highlight any of the fields on the form and say search on that data. Open another sheet, search on that data. So as you're searching for data here, you might want to just know every inquiry or every change somebody did. Maybe I want to know it. I don't want to know this. I want to know every change. I'll highlight these two fields that Lawson did on 8/23, and I'll search. So here's every change that user did on that day. So you don't have to keep going back and building new filters. And by the way, I could say, you know what, I just want to see this summarized. Just take me to the activity monitor data. Just show me the summary of that data. There it is. That's kind of what I wanted to see. I don't need all the detail. I just want to know what they worked on. So we can jump to different data sets, and you can build these just on the fly by holding control down and clicking on the form. This would be all, see if there's any of these. And I can search. Right? And there's two of them. So kind of cool technology we built there, but again, we're trying to give you a quick way to go through it, a quick way to see what data changed. And we even do what we call cross keys, because, you know, an employee ID on the employee time entry screen will be key 3, but on the employee master file it might be key 2. You know, vendor is going to be different keys. The vendor ID and the vendor file is going to be different than it was in the invoicing file. So we do cross key searches. So if I look at this, I got this employee 105 search. And what this is going, if I look at my criteria, you'll see I have different forms here, HR11, HR28. And what this advanced, now this happens to be key 2, but it could be any key, because the criteria says find 105 in any of the keys and return that data for me. And so that's what it does. So it finds 105, I don't care what key it's in, I just know, I want to know everything done on this employee. By the way, you can do the same thing in the monitor, the cross key selection. So if you want to know everything on a particular invoice, you can do that. If you want to know everything on a particular, you know, a journal entry or an employee ID or a vendor ID, you can cross key search that, and we'll tell you everything, every transaction that happened that matches that ID. But that's something you can do within either one of the monitoring applications. The tool has it. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. We still got a few minutes here, and the only thing I really have to get to then, oh no, we talked about segregation of duties. So I think I've gone through, so I went through Lawson reports, segregation duties, kind of the remediation grid, the auditing process, landmark security, kind of the other form queries. You'll see there are some other things here that we do. When we talked about landmark, there was a comparison tool we have, because as you know in landmark, you can't modify Lawson's base security classes. You can copy it and modify them, right? Well, a lot of customers want to know, boy, I don't know, the last person modified some stuff. We have no idea what's different. Well, then what we'll do is we'll compare your security class at the rule level. We'll compare every class to every other class. We'll tell you what's different. And we'll tell you if anything has changed. So when this comes back, you're going to get a grid that's going to say, a lot of them might be, I see I got 2 of them here. These are exactly the same. Say 100% the same, 21 common objects. And as I scroll down, I'm going to start to get down here. I think where I have there some differences. So now, this process scheduling all access versus this process scheduling all access _ST, that was a copy. If I expand this, I can see what's different. And the object down here at the bottom, LPA admin, the rule's been removed. I can now see what's different in some of these rules. Because, there's just no easy way to go into those things if you've been in landmark security and figure out what the heck is going on and what's changed. We'll do this at the role level. We'll do this at the security class level. But these are some of the tools. This would come with the landmark reporting as well. I think that's about all I got. Now there's another question. For hosted customers, where's the security audit reporting data stored? Well, it's initially, Lawson has its own database within the LS admin tool. So it's going to be in there that we're going to pull it from. When we pull that out then, you can have the Kinsey server, the database. We'll have our own server set up. That can be, you can have Lawson host that server. You can be hosted and keep that server on premise. It's just a VM. And so wherever the Kinsey VM server lives, and that could be still stays. You can leave it at Velocity, you can leave it at Lawson, or you can bring it on premise. That data would be pulled across into that server for reporting purposes. And so every night it would go back to the Lawson server, gather that information, and bring in any updated records. So now the database we use to do that is MariaDB. For transaction auditing, that can be Oracle or MS SQL or MariaDB. For our other tools, we're using MariaDB because it's open source. So all of our applications, we try to make this as inexpensive as possible for people. So we can run on a Linux VM or Windows. We run Tomcat. We run Java. It's all Java-based code, and it runs MariaDB, which is the open source version of MySQL for all the database. So all of our parameters, all of your LDAP data is stored in there, your SOD rules are stored in there, and the security data we pull back, and activity monitor. That data is all stored in MariaDB. But that database can live wherever you want it, but most people keep it on the Kinsey VM. And I think that's it. I won't go, there's some modeling stuff I won't go into here, but I just want to give you kind of an overview then of everything that we're doing. We got done with here within 5 minutes. And we certainly can do, we can do demos for your team. I will be going much deeper again on all the reporting aspects for security next Friday. So if you haven't signed up, our website has a link to that. If you go there, you actually see more about our tools as well. So if you just go to kinsey.com, I'll put this presentation up today. I'll post it out here. You can register for next week's webinar here. There's a registration button right there. If you want to see the security reporting and find out obviously more about the products and stuff here too. So with that, I'll stick around if anybody wants to ask more questions. I did get one here. How long does it take to implement? Well, the installation, I'll break it into 2 parts, the training and the actual installation. So once you have, whatever it takes you to get the VM set up. Some customers get it set up within a week or 2. Some of them take a couple months just because of everything they got to go through. I'll assume we're talking from the point you have a VM ready for us. We'll have you up and running, depending on the apps. If you had everything, it'd be within 3 days. If you just had a couple of the apps, you'd be up probably same day. So if you just had security reporting, at the end of the day or the next morning, we'll probably collect data that night. The next morning, you'd be running security reports. We do a remote service for that, so we don't have to come on site to do anything. Our training then is also mostly done remote, unless we happen to have a consultant that lives near you. Then they'll come in if you want them to. But our consultants generally do 2 to 3 hour training sessions and break those out 2 or 3 times a week. We only put in, for our products, generally 3 to 4 days of training. And that, again, that's broken down. So, we have certainly customers are realizing the benefits of having these within a day or 2 of us actually implementing the product. Quite honestly, what takes the time is people getting the VM ready, getting us the credentials to get in. But once we're in, it's a quick turnaround. So again, if anybody has any questions, put them on the chat. I'm happy to answer them. And Guy Henson will be following up with you regarding maybe what you might want to do going forward. And again, if you want a demo to your team, happy to do it anytime. So thank you for joining. And I'll just stick around and listen to the chat, and if anybody puts something on there, I'll answer. Thank you all.